If you would just kind of bow your heads a little bit and just give a little thanks here, okay? Beloved Father, we thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for providing us this significant moment and mission. We want to thank you for protecting, guiding, and covering Dr. Kai Dele. We thank you for her leadership, as well as the other members of the Made Man throughout the world. We take this mission very, very serious, and we pray that this discussion, this dialogue is productive, and we're able to move this and gather the information so that we can transform the hearts, minds, and spirits of our people. In your name we pray. Amen.
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 Jay, so Brother Cecil Burrows.
So good evening. We have two new participants that we're looking forward to getting to meet and engage in dialogue. But just a quick introduction. My name is Cecil Burrows. I'm a Senior Vice President with Wells Fargo Bank and also the CEO of a men's mentoring, styling, and etiquette initiative called the Benedict Society, chartered here in Charlotte. The biggest thing that pulled me to this initiative was really the focus, one, because I'm a member of the Made Men Initiative, which is 2,000 members plus strong, leveraging partnerships within the corporate and community organizations of 350 plus, in addition to international relationships that Kai and her administrative staff have continued to cultivate and curate over the past number of years. And we get the benefit of having fellowship conversations and discussions that potentially look to influence what we try to do within our communities. The biggest thing here is the mantra around what really got Reggie and I and Chantel involved at the levels we are is acknowledging that nothing changes if nothing changes. And that is a big, big deal. We've sat back through the pandemic, listening to things that are impacting us, seeing things and feeling things that have been impacting us, as Kai referenced in the socioeconomic space, healthcare space, and then also the equality and justice space as well. Over the past 48 hours, we've had conversations with individuals from different walks of life to lend Charlotte's voice on some thoughts that we have around how we can provide some improvement, thoughts for improvement and insights for improvement and potential options and some potential triggers that can help our community, specifically centered around the impacts around Black and brown men within our community directly, acknowledging our sisters that we have on the line who are adding their voices as well and thoughts as well, which we really appreciate. But our focus here is what can we do to come up with some solutions while acknowledging some of the things that have been laid out at us as challenges as well to help further our dialogue. We've had some great sessions last night that ran upwards of an hour and a half to 2 hours. Some good back and forth and come up with some ideas from our prior two calls in the mental health space and then also the racial justice space as well, and some commitments as well, which was great to hear. We're looking to do the same thing this evening around the economic equality space and potentially some proposals that are out there. We have some uniquely qualified individuals that will be dialing in with us. David Knight, who we'll be introducing shortly, and Charles DeBow, who will be joining us as well. Individual that's tied in with the policy space as well. But I'd love to yield the floor to others to introduce themselves as well. Looking forward to some fruitful dialogue as a group. And real quick, before I hand it over to Chantel, just so y'all know, the Made Man will be leveraging, these calls have been going on in states throughout the United States. It's intended to aggregate this information from national and local leaders directly. This is, as Kai had referenced before, going into white papers. There will be further research and interviews being done, including government and administrative professionals that can weigh in to ensure that we shape our format of what we provide out to the administrations for consideration. So this isn't it. This is a part of an aggregated, curated initiative that is moving across the different states where Made Men has a footprint in the United States and some international as well. So just wanted to lend a voice to that. Chantel, I'll go ahead and yield the floor to you.
Okay, Chantel Bynum, Assistant Vice President with Wells Fargo for a little bit longer, and I'll be starting a new adventure here shortly in 2021. That'll be called Christopher Ray. So very excited to be here. A huge part. Yeah, I knew you probably put me on the spot as I said went ahead and said it.
Capacity building, see Christopher Ray. I'm a sponsor.
Yeah. But very heavily involved in the community in the Charlotte market and surrounding area. So very excited that Kai took the initiative to pull us all together to talk through some of these issues. Just one quick housekeeping. I think I don't have to do that much because we're such a small group, but everybody's on mute and that's lovely. So we don't get any background noise, and I'll turn it over to the next person to introduce themselves.
Kim, let's kick it to you.
Yeah, we'll kick it to Kim.
I can do that. I'm Kim Caldwell. I'm also a public health strategist with Mecklenburg County Public Health, and I work in policy and prevention, focusing in tobacco control. And the fun part of my job is I get to focus on priority populations. So each individual population gets 100% of my time. And hopefully eliminating secondhand smoke exposure and creating healthier lives. So I'm just very grateful to be a part of the think tank tonight. Not sure why I'm stuttering. And so thank you for having me.
Welcome. Dr. Pinckney? You're on mute, sir. Still on mute. Let me see if I can unmute you on this side.
He was off for us. There we go.
Here you go.
I want to thank you guys for allowing me to be a part of this this outstanding group. I really hate I missed last night because I understand you guys have some interesting topics that kind of fall in line with my research and some of the things that I do. COVID-19 in particular, mental health, and even tonight is very interesting as you talk about economic empowerment of young people. I'm a professor of African Studies at University of North Carolina, Charlotte. I'll probably teach one of the most exciting courses on the college campus, section hip hop, rap music, and I teach a class called Hip Hop Entrepreneurship, where we actually take young people and teach them how to be entrepreneurs within the framework or underpinnings of the hip hop culture. In addition to that, I'm a member of the NCAA legislation committee, and I've been very busy with the NCAA in reference to COVID-19 and student athletes in terms of will we play or will we not play, especially as it relates to historically Black colleges and universities. I'm also an advocate for student athletes' mental health. I actually run a nonprofit called the Educational Research Group. We do a lot of public health messaging. We do target HIV and AIDS, tobacco, and other public health issues. Public health campaigns is what we specialize in. But that's just enough for what I do. I'd love to hear from the rest of you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we can definitely broach that subject. We don't want to miss the opportunity. We can revisit mental health during this conversation. Nothing's off limits necessarily. We're focusing on economic empowerment for a portion of it, but mental health is important. We had some really deep dialogue on that last night.
Oh yes.
Will, I see you've joined, sir. Are you able? But your video is off and you're muted. Are you able to?
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good evening. Sorry for not sharing the video, but ran into a bit of a family situation. So I have my 3-month-old that I'm actually feeding right now. So didn't want to include him on camera. But hopefully at some point later this evening, my wife will be able to step away and I'll be able to join you all and share my video feed. Will Carruthers, I am a Senior Vice President, Senior Finance Manager at Bank of America. Dr. Pinckney, I'm actually a alumni of UNC Charlotte and sad that while I was there, your class was not offered because it sounds really interesting. Sounds like something I would have liked to been able to take while I was studying. So I'm just really interested in getting into this conversation, enjoyed the conversations last night, and I look forward to learning from you all.
Thank you, Will. We just want to acknowledge some of our participants. We may have a few dialing in shortly. We're missing a few folks today for a various number of reasons. Corinne Mack, unfortunately, is not going to be able to join us. She ran into an issue, and NAACP Charlotte chapter lead president, sending prayers out to her as she's going through some initiatives within the community she's working through, which is great to hear that she's always a part of that. Troy Dandy, who is CAA sports agent, I think the only African-American senior sports agent within that organization. Unfortunately, he's not going to be, it doesn't look like he's going to be able to join us this evening. We miss his thought process and some of the things that we were going to be capturing, but future opportunities come up to engage. Will Wilson has run into some conflicts. He's going to attempt to attend. Will lend a pretty balanced voice to our conversations, what I think was well needed to get an understanding of some things that we might want to think about, right? To offset some of the thoughts around challenges that we had within the Charlotte community. As Will Wilson, who's an entrepreneur here in Charlotte and NASCAR champion, I believe 3-time NASCAR champion, part of the pit crew, but also clothier to the stars within our particular area. And out, we listed D.L. Hughley, Oscar De La Hoya, and a few others as some of his primary clients, George Lopez, et cetera, in and out of circles throughout the Charlotte market and elsewhere. It's an influencer within social platforms as well. And then lastly, Stephen Myers, president, CBM companies, runs mortgage companies, I think several, if I remember correctly, last night in the Charlotte market and in the LA territories as well. I had a chance to join us and lend his voice to our conversation as it related to equality and racial justice last night. I don't sense that Stephen will be on tonight, but I know we'll be listening to recording post. I have the pleasure of introducing David Knight. Welcome to the conversation, sir. David is a senior executive at Bank of America. He lists his primary areas of focus as a banker, entrepreneur, which lends a great cross-pollination of our conversation today. His family owns some businesses in Charlotte, and also a pragmatist as well, which I love when you reference that relative to the ways that we need to think about things within the Charlotte entity as well. And David and a team that he's pulled together within Charlotte has been having some several conversation pieces around some things that need to be done to positively have some impacts within our community as well. So I deemed it ideal to have David lend a voice to some things that they're learning and been discussing as their team and see where there's some opportunities to collaborate. Our conversation this evening will be trying to find solutions. We'll discuss some challenges that we have, definitely, but we really want to discuss what are some things that we need to do to move forward. Our goal, as I referenced earlier, is what can we do to add to white papers that'll be coming in from Charlotte Voice's perspective, right? So there's other things that are happening, but we'll be lending into a group that'll have national and regional implications as well, leveraging the platforms that we have here with all the organizations, partnerships from a corporate-based perspective, administrative-based perspective, et cetera. So think about that as we progress in our dialogue this evening. Let's set the premise, but then attack it from a standpoint of the resolutions that we may potentially have. The primary focus will be around the implications of how the pandemic has exposed the gaps that we have around equality. In the economic empowerment space, some real gaps have been exposed, quite frankly, and mental health as well, and then also in the racial justice space. So we can vary off to certain topics, but I want to make sure that we walk away with some things in the economic empowerment space as well once we're done. Conversations are being recorded, and we will make sure that we have access to that. As we noted, all these sessions are being vetted and aggregated, and Reggie and I are being called into a national discussion post with all the national chairs of these conversations as we work towards the development of the white papers from all the things that have been pulled from the prior conversations. So David, if you can take a second to just introduce yourself and your bio and your background, and then we'll start in our conversation.
Will do, Cecil. Thank you. David Knight. I'm originally from Jamaica. I moved to the United States when I went to University of Virginia for college, and I work at Bank of America. And it's it's an interesting time, and this is an interesting group. Uh, you know, I have a, Cecil mentioned that there are a small group of us that meet. There are about 7 or 8 of us, and we call it the Thursday group. And we meet the second Thursday of every month. And this started, I don't know how long ago, but maybe 8, 10 months ago with 2 of us, and then 3 of us, and then 4 of us. And there were interesting pieces that came up. And I've leveraged this group in interesting ways. One way was during the height of our racial protests. My daughter, 16, my 16-year-old daughter, she was 15 then, we went on a protest walk. And before we went, she asked the question, what does success look like? And I was at the same time beaming with pride and going, oh my goodness, how am I going to respond to this child? Because that's a really good question.
Exactly.
And I actually took it back to the Thursday group. I, drafted some stuff, took it back to the Thursday group, and we started talking about it. And we went through, things like qualified immunity, and we went through things like, if you use the same group to do everything, it's that if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And we discussed a bunch of these items around kind of how can this move forward effectively, education and interaction, and it led to some wonderful discussion points and ideas. And most importantly, I was able to succinctly and intelligently communicate what it means to my daughter, and that I had a lot of pride in that. My wife runs 2 Dunkin' Donuts stores in the city, and I do the books. And when she tells me, I go behind the counter and serve coffee. I work with a bunch of groups, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my social side. And I partner with a group called the Relatives in Charlotte, and we drop off food for their at their crisis center, and I do a lot of sessions, mentoring sessions for their at-risk young people. They're not youth; they're mostly kind of aged out of the youth business, and they're now young adults, but they're very poorly equipped to survive well. And it was interesting because one of my learnings was I invited, I met and I started mentoring and a young man, and he was looking for a job. And I said, well, come on down. I'll hire you. I'll take a risk. And I drove him down to the store and when can you start? What do you need? If you need X amount, I'll front it for you, and then you can start, and we'll make it work. And he said, okay, what are the hours? And we talked it through. And here's his challenge. This role was in Fort Mill. So he would get out of where he was staying, which was a shelter, to get the various transports, of which the closest one would get him somewhere around 3 miles away from the store. And then he would have to walk that 3 miles or whatever. And it would probably take him 2.5 hours to get to work. So we open at 5 in the morning. That's our busy time all the way till about 10 in the morning. Maybe not a good thing. All right, what about the afternoon shift? Okay, the challenge is for the shelter, you have to be in line. And if you're not in line and you don't get in, you don't get in. You have to go find somewhere else. So at, whether that's 5:30 or 6 o'clock or whatever time it is, he needs to be there, which means he can't leave way down in Fort Mill at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And yet I still have to pay him enough and it has to make sense. And it made me aware that, when we talk about whether it's homelessness or, helping our young people advance, the challenges are deeper than here's a job, right? Here, I'll give you, minimum wage is $7.25 or $7.50. Don't worry, I'll pay you $8.50. That's not even scratching the surface of what this young man needed, and identified my inability, despite the resources that I had, to effectively help this single young man. In the end, we worked with it and we got him a job at the airport, and there are buses that go directly from uptown to the airport and directly back. And so, he started going. And then the next step was to start working on housing and the like. I communicate with the relatives, with Teach for America, with American corporate partners in terms of military people. I'm big on military. Charlotte Bridge Homes. It feels like I'm trying to do stuff, but at the same time, I'm not sure if I'm really moving the needle. And the challenge, I think, from my perspective, is you have all of these different groups, some of which overlap, some of which don't, all of which have good intent. But how do we really move the needle? And I think it takes more, and it takes a bigger, longer term strategy than helping one kid, which might be good for a little bit, but really is not moving that needle. And so when Cecil said, "Hey, are you interested in speaking with you guys?" I didn't look at it as an opportunity for me to bestow wisdom, sorry. But I looked at it as an opportunity for me to share and to receive the collective wisdom of this group. Because the fact that you're here already engaged in this conversation means that you not only have something to say, but you've thought about it, and you have, you're basically through this group giving flight to those ideas and concepts to make a difference. With each one of you, and after hearing your dialogue, it's interesting, one person in sports and athletes and entertainers, right? And I'm working at the bank, I'm working on a program. And no, this is not the bank's program. This is me working with resources to put together a program for athletes and entertainers, because so many of our folks that come into big money don't know how to manage it effectively. So partnering with our wealth group and this group and our that group, and we're kind of pulling it together and pulling it out of better money habits, which is one of the tools that we leverage. And it's an interesting time and an opportune time. So in the conversations, I'm a member of a group called Black Leadership Advisory Council in the bank. And the conversations that we're having now with everything that's come from social, racial, and Cecil said the highlighted discrepancies, right, or disparities that have been identified. What does this mean? And one of the things that we've realized and we're really trying to harness is every group that's been successful has been so not in and of itself, but as a result of the effective harnessing and leveraging of allied power. And so the question that for me kind of comes in is not just, connecting the groups, but also bringing in the allies that believe and are of like-minded in terms of moving us forward, and how do we harness and drive that forward. Hopefully that's not too much, but thank you for the opportunity.
Still got more to go. You're not going anywhere. We got some time to have conversation. It's a good setup, and it's perfectly put relative to opportunities. And it's as Brother Singleton, who is on the line as well, Brother Reggie, who runs a group tied in with empowering youth to understand building resources in unique instances, right? To really be self-sourced and self-regulated relative to opportunities that we have with the mails place. You're uniquely positioned to identify things that we may have to get that power in an economic sense. But before we jump there, I saw that Mr. Dubois has joined us, and I just wanted to take a second to welcome him. Good evening, Mr. Dubois. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you joining us today.
It's an honor to be here and to be part of such a real moment in time and presence when the work we're doing is so vital and needed, and it's part of a huge movement. And we're really excited from the made man perspective on having some fresh voices, some fresh perspectives, and really empathetic. And we're not the usual suspects.
Sure.
And from the National Black Chamber of Commerce perspective, we've had a great landscape of a community health check, if you will, based on just a unprecedented, unimaginable combination of things happening all at one time that started as a surprise with a health crisis that then became, you wouldn't have even ever imagined how all business, all commerce globally could just be stopped on a dime.
Correct.
And that's exactly what happened out of, I mean, the National Black Chamber of Commerce, we actually spent time pushing back or deterring or fighting back about it's a black thing. In the beginning, it was a black thing. Well, only black people with health issues, sugar, high blood pressure, mailmen, grocery store clerks, people like that only need to be concerned. And so you had a lot of folks saying, well, I don't need a mask, I'm not doing this and all that. And it went on a little bit further. And all the while, the economic erosion has begun, that there was this supposed paycheck protection program that was going to allow businesses to maintain employees. So don't panic. Then there was the $3.2 trillion first stimulus checks that went out, and who could get them. And it was your IRS relationship in order and automatically get a check, didn't get a check. And then this on March 16th, they passed, or they put a memo of exemption out from the Labor Department. And the memo of exemption essentially clearly just waived affirmative action, waived it. We thought it was unconstitutional, but a lot of groups that should have been disturbed by it didn't say a word, not a peep. And we pushed on it. But then when we saw that 90% of the black businesses, and it wasn't just black businesses, but 90% of black businesses didn't get even a response out of paycheck protection or the stimulus program. And we believe it was a direct result because if you could call it coded or dog whistle or something, when this memo from the Labor Department went out saying affirmative action was waived, they went all the way to the left with that, in the sense that ain't none of y'all getting a penny. And those that threatened to sue and had some degree of banking relationship, so they say 10% got something, 90% of that 10% got much less than what they were seeking. So we went from a health crisis to the shame, blame, to the purported stimulus program, that then all this stuff is going on, got us distracted, and out of nowhere, here comes the clearest on your TV, primetime living room, systemic racism example that what happened with George Floyd. And out of George Floyd came, according to Forbes magazine, $435 million in a couple of weeks that went to a handful of civil rights and social justice groups. And then it comes out that Blue Lives Matter had a lot to do with that. And so a lot of the other corporations that were lining up to do something took a step back and said they did not want to be politicized. And so out of that came community concern, compassion elements of when organizations such as ours or business oriented start to get attention and dialogue about what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, and how does a corporation that openly admits they aren't in touch with diversity and inclusion and how to help, we got some money here, what are we going to do with it? So that kind of helped be the genesis and the stimulus or the catalyst for the think tanks and where do we want to fit in and how are we going to do it? And most importantly, to recognize the character and the substance of the aggregation of the Made Man organization and its network and its peripheral surroundings, to give a voice, to have an opportunity, and then to even go further and right up to where we are today, particularly Georgia, Philadelphia, Detroit, and maybe New York, a few others, totally turned out the vote and showed action, motivation, reaction, and concern and compassion and interest. And that's where I'm encouraging the whole Made Man Network to not just come up with a white paper or come up with these ideas, but to represent those ideas ourselves at the table and not necessarily rely on political representation or any kind of purported leadership that has been the status quo for so long, because we're not going to get anything unless we go and demand it. And that we have to sit there at the table in the kitchen while the real deal's getting cooked up and be a part of it. So we're not putting all that burden on your shoulders to cover all these many myriads of different variations and versions of it, but just to allow for the creative process, the empathy of it, what you see in your community and how and what. Now, Charlotte has always been active, a great group of people and a lot of resources there, but have always had systemic racism or redlining or other elements of that restricted the livelihood of entrepreneurism, which is the core of the Black community. And people that, you know, when they waive affirmative action, doesn't necessarily put you out of business or impact you so. So I just wanted to say encouragement, and I'm happy to be here, and I want to offer any type of resources or perspective from maybe from the national or from where we can carry best practices, best thoughts from Atlanta to Charlotte or from Charlotte to wherever. But it is a clearly linked nationally, and I'll even go further and say globally. Our brothers in Africa, Colombia, South America, Costa Rica, the Caribbean, they're all crying and hoping and saying, you know, can we link hands, we link arms and form some relationships where we can exchange or support ideas and not necessarily make too much dependence on government or any other entity to, like, quote unquote, take care of us. So thank you. I'm sorry I got caught up in traffic and I'm a little bit late, but I'm happy to be here. But it's a quaint group, and everybody just be yourself, do what you want to do, and we're going to go fight. That's all it is to it. We're going to ask for it and make a difference, and we want to see that difference happen in Charlotte, you know, in your areas, not just necessarily the city, the state, or universities. I mean, everything from education to cultural impact to however, whatever. One thing I will say is very encouraging is that we do have a number of corporations that have stepped up and said, we know we're down on our procurement numbers and we're going to commit money, commit opportunities, contracts with Black businesses. We just want to qualify them. Some of them are in your area. And so at some point we'll come back and we can have a chance to galvanize the business owners, but we're asking everybody to make a social responsibility commitment. You know, not just come and oh, woe is me, but what are we going to do? How are we not going to try to prevent this happening again? You know, those type of elements. Is there any particular line of thought or topics that is on the table now?
Yeah, the premise of what we were going, and it fits in your dialogue completely, right? It's the pandemic has exposed quite a bit within our communities, whether it be from a racial justice perspective, equality perspective, mental health, and economic empowerment, which is in line directly as you referenced. What we're wanting to figure out within Charlotte is knowing the gap exists when you look at Black and Brown and the implications of what this has shown us. What are some solutions or ideas that we have around, one, identifying where you can go to get assistance where needed? What can we do to right size as best we can, equal the playing field within the economic empowerment space? Knowing that there's some challenges to access, knowing there's some challenges to education and awareness, and potentially in some instances, market our plans better. One of the things that we got into within mental health last night was identifying there was a true gap to really understanding those within the Black and Brown communities who are here to assist, and how giving them a platform to be able to articulate that while they're still following the governmental structure, they're getting grants and operating in that space. Folks are leveraging other platforms to get the business they're looking for. So there's a big miss there while they're running through the usual norms. You have others that are using social media platforms and things along those lines where you can go and understand, hey, here's an opportunity here for me to engage with someone I'm looking for, to support businesses in our particular territories that we want to lend Black and Brown businesses as an example. But we may not be marketing as best we can or knowing how to leverage all the vehicles that are available to us. So we talked about some of that within that space. This evening, we wanted to talk about it from an economic perspective, whether it's to some of the points you brought up. Do we need to build awareness around where you can go to get access, access to lending opportunities, the PPP program, which we know some of the key points you brought up have been infuriating, right, within our communities and what's been there, and other things from that standpoint. And that's assisting men of all ages. The focus is around the Black and Brown men from this perspective. But these are some of the things that I think that we wanted to come and attack this evening due to our conversation. And Mr. Knight has talked about some things that he's experienced as well to kind of bring that case home, being an entrepreneur in the Charlotte market, and understanding it's not as simple as just giving somebody a job. You have all the other elements you have to be able to solve for and support. And I'm not sure if that's readily aware within our communities directly. And I was going to turn it over to Reggie, who's also a chair of these conversations, to talk about some things that he's experienced from an economic perspective as well. Reggie, I was going to give that to you.
Okay, thank you, Brother Cecil, and welcome, Brother Chuck. Thank you so much for sharing. In addition to Brother David Knight, thank you so much. Brother Knight, is one of your Dunkin' Donuts at Sunset and Beatties Ford Road? Okay, you're on mute. Well, that is one of the Dunkin' Donuts that we go to. We have a garden farm that we've been growing in since 2009, right on Beatties Ford Road, right in the heart of Black Charlotte. And whenever our young warriors, when the young men are having great success, we reward them with some donuts. Typically, we are pushing clean, fresh, locally grown, culturally appropriate food and really emphasize healthy eating and healthy living. But when, as a little treat every now and then, we will take them to Dunkin' Donuts and we'll get them some cocoa and some donuts, of course. We get the ones with the less sugar. But my thoughts are on, you all remember Sam Greenlee? Sam Greenlee was a Black author who wrote a book called, and actually they made a movie out of it. It was called The Spook Who Sat by the Door. The Spook Who Sat by the Door. You might, by the very term of it, you might be concerned by the very title of it. However, it deals with this young man who was in Chicago. He was a gang member, and he was eventually recruited in the FBI because the local politicians at that time wanted and needed more Black votes. And so he felt that a way to get it was to bring in more Black people in the FBI at the time. They didn't have any. And so they brought this young man in. They did this huge press conference and they gathered a lot of accolades and recognition. And the elected official eventually won because of what he did with that one Black gentleman. Well, he went to the FBI and learned all he could. He learned every single aspect in and out of the whole operations. And then he took what he had learned, the skills, the tactics, the teachings, the strategy, and everything else, and he brought it back to his community. He eventually retired. He brought it back to Chicago, and he recruited some of the meanest, toughest guys in Chicago. And my point is that philosophy of when we are gifted and when we are blessed and when we're fortunate and we have the skill sets, the trainings and the access and the wealth and the resources, which is what many of our people suffer from. And we know that the great divide and the great disparity with Black wealth and white wealth, but also there is a stark disparity with well-to-do Blacks and Blacks who are just barely, generationally impoverished, economically and resourcefully. How do we help bridge the Africans, the people of African descent? How do we do a better job of getting them to engage and share resources, and particularly in light of Kwanzaa that's coming up, Ujamaa, the spirit of cooperative economics, where we do a better job of not only, and one of the outcomes I hope we come out of this, and it really shined light on it yesterday, was a better need for financial literacy, and not only putting our money in the bank, but purchasing land, and land is, Malcolm said, the basis for independence. So how do we help bridge the gap between our two worlds? I mean, the Blacks who have it and the Blacks that don't have it, and help address some of the animosity that exists between our two worlds? How do we create a philosophy of the spook who sat by the door?
Dr. Pinckney, I'd love to get your insight on when we think about some of the things that you're experiencing with the students that you're dealing with from an economic-based perspective and the teachings that you have.
It's interesting that Reggie would go there.
Yeah.
Reggie and I used to be roommates. So just I'm gonna let you give some self-disclosure on this. I'm actually
discussions.
my class next semester is actually entitled "The Psychology of the Black Experience," and within the Black experience, we look at every aspect: the economic aspect, the educational aspect. And going back to Chuck, I always ask my students, if we had to stick up America, what would be the most important 10 things that we would ask for? This is a stick up, MF, for what we want ours. What do we want as African Americans? I think that we all have to, I go back to a song by Dr. West and Prince called Crisis in Our Ecology. And that crisis in our ecology has caused us many, many faults. And, just on the economic end, the economic fields is just not been appropriated the right way to even give us a leg up, Reggie. You know that. Financial literacy, I'm a big proponent of financial literacy with student athletes, working with the NCAA and looking at all the money that comes through in terms of how these institutions are just profiting. And going back to COVID-19, the economic aspect and level struggles that I had to go through with Black college presidents, trying to get them to understand that you can't afford this and you can't pay for this and you can't protect these student athletes. They don't understand that. Reg, to kind of answer that question, man, this Naeem Akbar, know thyself. We got to get these young people to know thyself, but also we have to tap into their resources, their sensibilities, because these young people have a great level of sensibilities, A lot of times we engage what I call the 3D effect. We discriminate, devalue, and disrespect as older people. We have to come off of where we are and accept these young people for where they are and engage in what I like to call aggressive negotiation. How do we communicate? How do we engage? How do we teach? How do we teach entrepreneurship? How do we teach ownership? Reggie and I go back and forth. I would love to see the Males Place jump into this super hybrid farming that just puts out all kind of products in the Charlotte area, but also showing these young people how to market that, how to use e-commerce with it, how to go global with it, how to be a massive potato farmer sending potatoes to Belgium. Now we're thinking globally. I mean, there's just so much to go, but we just have so little resources as well, and how to manage it. I yield.
No, I think Chantel had a question for you.
No. I didn't have a question. I just wanted to give us our 10-minute warning to make the decision if we want to continue into 7:15 or 7:30. Just wanting to be mindful of everyone's time. And this is fantastic dialogue, so I'm not trying to stop us, but just want to keep us mindful.
I'm gonna have to depart at 7, but I really, really thoroughly enjoyed this, Reggie. I think Reggie and I, we go way back. And look, guys, I'm committed to doing whatever I need to do to uplift, empower, inspire. I'm one person, but I'm kind of spread wide. I will, if I make a commitment, I try to stick to it. But I try to get it done in Malcolm Gladwell, rapid. I engage in what I call rapid cognition. That's what young people need to engage in, that we have to think quickly. You go to the doctor has 10 minutes to answer, assess you, and make a decision. That's called rapid cognition.
And just one quick thing, because you brought up the financial literacy for athletes. That wasn't in my market. I did a lot of that with Johnson C. Smith's football team here and there throughout the years. So would love to connect with you on some of the free resources that are available to your students.
I'll be happy to. If you go YouTube, there's a video out. Just look up Dr. Pinkney Hip Hop Entrepreneurship. I think it's like a 10-15 minute video about what I did with one of my classes in terms of starting from scratch and teaching young people how to develop a business and how to grow it and how to maintain it and all that good stuff. And you see the presentations and all. So go check it out.
Charles, quick question. First of all, what is the name of your book? And then your thoughts are on when I was in college, we used to call it laundry money.
Right.
Back then we used to get, $40-something. Well, that's what I got, but I'm sure the big time boys at USC got significant. They got wallets, in their jacket pockets, but in handshakes and stuff like that. But are these young people doing any investments with their monies? Are they being taught anything from the athletes?
I'm glad you asked that question. When I first, I think in 2011, 2012, I was teaching a class at UNC Charlotte, and I was talking about the book I was getting ready to put out. The book is entitled "From Slave Ships to Scholarships: Apply to the Black Athlete." Reggie, I'll make sure you share the website with them a little later. But to answer your question, I got called into my chairperson's office and said the legal department at the university do not want you to be talking to student athletes about financial literacy. And at this particular time, I had student athletes who were getting $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a semester back in their pockets days after registration. But it was a catch. They had to move off campus. I tell people you have to follow the money with the NCAA. So I'm gonna move you off campus. You're gonna be paying rent to somebody. 9 out of 10 times, that person you're paying rent to doesn't look like anybody on this screen today. If you follow what I'm going, how the money is not being, recycled in our community. But I gave a talk at the Gantt Center 2 years ago in terms of student athletes be compensated, and of course I said yes, because when you look at what happened with Zion and Duke, and how much money was actually these guys are generating. And they said if you had to pay that Duke particular team, the least likely player will make $1 million. It is a lot of money that comes through the NCAA. The NCAA made $200 million last year. They're hurting. So they're trying to make $600 million this year to make up for what they lost on the backs of Negro athletes. I'm almost for giving the boosters back. Give the cats some money, but give them some education so they can know what to do with the money. Yes, sir.
So thank you for that, Dr. Pickney. So relative to where did it end up with them telling you that financial literacy, they didn't want you teaching that on campus?
Well, that is what it was. They didn't want me to talk to these Negro athletes. What's happened? Let's say, and I told these guys as a quick formula, I'm not a banker. You know, David, you can probably come up with a better plan. I said, look, if I got 20 of you guys on the team and all you guys are getting $10,000, $11,000 a year, a semester, if I can get you guys to put $5,000 in a pot, 20 of you guys every semester, and you do that for 4 semesters, you got your own little savings and loan going on right now. What could you do with that? Take 5 and put in your pocket, do what you want. You guys should
graduate. When you graduate.
When you graduate.
Mm-hmm.
My position in the book, I said, all right, let's not give the student athletes money. Let's put it in a trust. And let's let it trust for 4 years. If I'm getting $15,000, $25,000 a year, you know, and I'm not paying taxes on it, you know, a semester, let's put it up. And now you got 20 of these guys putting all that money together. Now you're talking about having some power. If they have the right tutelage.
Sure.
You know, the other aspect is you guys remember Clowning, number 1 draft pick of Carolina Reggie, and his roommate was JT Surratt from Winston-Salem. When JT was in my office, I had a friend who knew JT, and I said, JT, how much money did you and Clowning blow last year? He sat back, took about a minute. He said, about 25,000. I said, well, what y'all doing? What the hell were y'all doing? He said, man, we just fly down to Florida, weekend after the game, party, you know, fly back. We got all kind of these bank cards laying around in the apartment, because that's how they give the kids now, Richard. They don't give them cash. They give them bank cards now. They give you a $500 bank card. They give you, you know, Booster might slip you a $400 bank card, you know, maybe $1,000. But I said, $25,000 you guys blew in 32 weeks, because you're talking about 2 semesters, 16 weeks a semester. I said, you know, you got a lot of people who don't make $25,000, probably don't take home, but maybe, you know, 20. You guys blew it. And they're not the only one who are doing that shit. Mm-hmm. So how do we get to those cats, David?
So I'm gonna comment on a few different things, and you guys might not invite me back. I'm just gonna lay it out. So, but I'm gonna give you my perspective and a couple of things. One, I would love to hear from Kim. I haven't heard from Kim yet. I want to hear from Kim.
Yes.
I know she has something to say. 2, we're focusing on black on black, and you know, the black divide, and how do we, and I at the beginning I mentioned about allies, and I know, for example, at my bank, right, they do a lot of sponsorship. They sponsor at the Gantt Center, all over the place. The question is, how do we effectively tap into these channels such that we can then take it, leverage it, and do more? So do I think we need to harness the talent that's on this call? Absolutely. And the other talent that's beside it? Absolutely. But if Tom Brady said, hey, I'm interested because of percentage of my team and I want to help, I would say, come in, have a chair, here's your own camera, and let's see how you can leverage and move us forward. And, you know, I look at our population and the adjustments, and, you know, in one sense, we're like, wow, man, America, the browning of America, wonderful. In another sense, the reduction of Black and the increase of Hispanic, right? You figure it out how you want to look at it. But I know that in my bank, I'm a member of the Black Professional Group, And I'm a member of OLA, which is the Hispanic group. And I look at ways for us to collaborate so that we can have a broader impact and footprint. So take it for what it's worth, right? But I just, it's got to be a way of plugging in, harnessing, and leveraging. Because I think there are a lot of folks that are interested in hearing what you have to say and in participating in positive ways. Some of which look like us, some of which don't.
And there was a participant last night that brought those same points up, right? Allyship is one of the most important things that we need to consider as it relates to addressing our issues that we've discussed, because that is going to help open up some gates in some areas. There are a lot that is within our control that we need to manage, but allyship is not something that should be ignored. And you're absolutely correct. Mr. Carruthers, who is not able to show his camera, Kim as well, and Chantel. And Chantel has a lot of insights as it relates to the financial literacy piece. So I think there's something there from that standpoint, based off the question that Chuck posed before, which is how do we get to some solves? So I'm going to yield to Kim to jump into some of this from her perspective.
Yes, thank you. And I'm also enjoying the conversation. How do we get to some of the solutions? I'm hearing from tonight's call that it seems like we're focused on college age and above. Not saying that we're not focused on elementary and middle or K through 12, but it did remind me of my college days, and you're just trying to make it. You're just trying to get through class. You're trying to figure out who you are. And the next thing you know, you're graduating and you get a job and you fill out those forms on day one, right? Those forms that say, I'm going to put X amount into this plan and X amount to this plan. Do I need short-term disability, long? What is this, right? That came to me as a result of this conversation. I don't know the solution to completing the paperwork, and I've held jobs even in high school where you had to complete the same paperwork, but it really happens to you when you get that first full-time job, and you have to make these decisions. And then you're only paid, I think my first job out of college is $10 an hour. Do you think I checked the box for any kind of insurance? No. No, I needed the full $10. And so that came to me, but I don't know the solution right at this time. I do think that creating a sense of creating that plan. So it has to be taught that here's your plan. This is your 1-year plan, your 3-year plan. When you get out of college, you'll be filling out these forms. You'll be going to these jobs. They're going to ask you how much do you want to put into this bank. You may want to invest. No one said anything about investing when I graduated from college in 2003. It was just you go to work, you do your job, complete the forms, and hopefully stay on the job. But there was no conversation about investment. And so that I know I lost a number of years of just what do you do? I'm pretty confident that is still happening in 2020, where we are graduating students, expecting them to get the job at the big bank or the hospital or going back into the college and teaching. But we're not there. There's a gap there, and you lose those 5 years or 10 years, whereas our white colleagues have the advancements because that's taught to them. So if that would have been taught to me early on, I would have been able to make some different decisions. And so I know that for a fact. And I know I didn't provide a solution, but I do know that that would have mattered to me early on if I would have been taught about investing and why the monies need to go where they need to go in terms of disability and 401ks and 501, not 501, but 401ks and whatever other plans I needed to be involved in.
Mr. Carruthers, wanted to yield to you to talk a little bit. Will's also in the banking industry as well, and it's been tied into some literacy initiatives, et cetera. Love to get you to opine as we think about some of this towards solutions as well.
It all goes back to education. And Dr. Pinkney asked a question and directed to David, you know, how do we change how these athletes are looking at the money that they're receiving? I think it starts early on, right? It's growing up understanding that money is a tool, money is a resource, and understanding the relationship and how to utilize money to your benefit. Right, Kim, you hit on some of those things, you know, understanding investing in 401ks, but even more elementary than that is having, you know, younger children understand the value of ownership, the value of equity, understanding that compound interest is a real thing, understanding that you have assets and liabilities, and you would always prefer your assets to be more than your liabilities, and hopefully your assets can pay for your liabilities. So I think that education, especially at a young age, is critical. And it's something as simple as me having a conversation with my daughter, and in the mall, she says, as an example, "Hey, Daddy, I want to buy something from the Disney store. I want a toy." I said, "Well, what about if we bought a stock?" And she said, "Well, what's that?" I said, "Well, you can own part of Disney." And her eyes lit up. "Wow, you mean I can own part of Disney?" Yeah. So every time you watch the Disney Channel or you go to Disney World, that will benefit you in the long run. And the light bulb went on immediately. And the conversations that we've had since then have been completely different. So I think if we can more broadly have those conversations with younger children, by the time they get to college, right, Dr. Pinkney, and you bring it up, they're already thinking we can pool this money together, and maybe someone that graduated from the team owns some of the apartments, and they can be partners and invest. So it could, I think it could open up a ton of possibilities. So we don't have African American students graduating from college or graduating from high school and then at least not having some cursory understanding of how they can leverage their finances.
Thank you for that, Chantel.
Yeah. Cecil knows this is my heart and soul of what I did for a number of years within Wells Fargo. And I'm going to add to the solution component now. There are several categories of how you break up financial education. That's K through 12. That's college, adult, seniors, military. And you can take the elderly into a component of it as well, because there are a lot of people that are out there. The additional part to that is a small business. And then you have to start with the basics in that space around credit, around budgeting, all of those things. And then you have to be able to take it to the investment strategy and the retirement strategy. All of those are different buckets. And when we think about it, if we think about it collectively, it's overwhelming. But when you start breaking it down into a strategic process, which is a strategy I had to do, you know, you have to know which group, where you're going to target, who's going to target it. And the curriculum's there. It's built, it's free. There's resources for all the things I'm talking about. And you can pick your poison. But I think and then when you think about those components, you have to look at your school systems. You have to look at your churches. I've built panels with people from different backgrounds. Cecil's done some of those for me where we've gone in, talked about financial literacy. I've used school teachers. I've used investment advisors. I've used people in the field. But you've got to cater to the audiences, and we can hit, you hit them with the school systems, the colleges, the churches, the community organizations, your sororities, your fraternities. That is where you have to have the audience to be able to deliver it, make it value added, make it interactive, and not speak at them, but give them opportunity to create that dialogue. And as we talk through this, we've even pulled together small businessmen to let them, or small business groups, to say, hey, these are resources. Here's how you can build it. And then I've consulted and worked for small business owners. So I've done the QuickBooks. So I know how they think a little bit more. So when we think about the solution, we can't tackle it all. but we can. But it's a process, and it's got to be a strategy, and you can't just dump it all. It can't be a data dump. And it's how do you want to execute that? Because we can do that in the Charlotte market, and we can do it globally. And that's just what I was thinking as we were talking through all of this. It's out there. And it's not that hard to build a strategy to tackle it, but you've got to have that support in the community to deliver it. And sometimes it's not a session just on financial education, but it's a component of another event that is occurring to give them slivers to gain that interest. And it's almost like you're marketing to get to the bottom line or get to the point where they actually want to come on their own.
So I had a question for Chuck, back to something that you had posed. You talked about some policies that have been impacted and pretty much in some cases just stripped away, and lack of knowledge around how these things could potentially impact certain communities from that standpoint. What are some things that have occurred that y'all know at the Commerce that would need to be righted for this new administration to get us back into the space of where we can build towards an equal playing field? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. There has been a steady erosion of things that were spent, since emancipation to evolve. So let me give you an example. Leading up into the Kennedy Johnson era, that's where the 1964 Civil Rights Act evolved. And everything post World War II, economic development, people getting jobs in factories, being able to buy homes, equity was going in. And out of that, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, a huge diversity inclusion kind of thing came about with like the SBA coming up with the 8A program and hub zones and disadvantaged business opportunities and all that. Well, then come along to the point of where it was Clinton and it was the father of the vice president, I forgot his name, but they started bundling contracts. So the National Black Chamber of Commerce was really founded on the premise of a little bit more sophisticated small business learning how to do business with the government. The government is the biggest source of procurement, of money, of cash flow. And as Black businesses started getting into the 8A program, they started getting an opportunity to kind of get in the game and to compete and to play. And a certain percentage of all the business had to go to minority businesses. So they started bundling contracts, and you had a company, say Boeing, that was building a Vector jet that was a $600 billion project. But then while they're in there talking to the contracting officers and doing the deal, they kind of said, well, we also got this landscaping, we got some maintenance, we need to provide some meals. Can y'all help us with that? And so the next thing you know, Boeing is doing things they have nothing in their wheelhouse doing it, but they're saying, we'll take the contract for it. They're writing it on the books. For example, you heard about the $160 toilet seat or the $150 hammer. They're charging the federal government to go out, cut grass, rake leaves, trim hedges, remove snow. That one guy previous to that on one military base had a $30 million a year business. But when they bundle their contracts, Boeing goes from maybe $600 million to 700, 800, 900 million, and it put all these other people out. And ever since they stopped adhering to guidelines, there aren't laws, but they're guidelines, and they weren't being adhered to. The template is on the books now. So for example, if we went to Biden and said, would you at least play by the rules? Would you listen and recognize that's a big start in the right direction? And so then we can, so on the private sector side to go with that, the corporations saying, yeah, you know what, you're right, we haven't been doing enough. Or they realize what they have been doing. And part of that may not on a first thought be to off Black or minority businesses, but we don't really need them, or how they're going to allow China to do something and not allow a competitive offer or business domestically, or maybe it's Black owned, but it's in South America or something. All these different other things. So first of all, they can come back and play by the rules or recognize them. Secondly, look at disparity studies. I'm not the guy to go into all the government money, but I am going to say there's tons of waste. There's tons of discretionary funds that are going to different places. Let me give you one, and Dr. Pinkney and your crew, everybody. Black universities, HBCUs, aren't getting a slither of the money that's out there for research and development, for university, for endowments. The White House and under Trump, they created an initiative for HBCUs that essentially was supposed to be doing internships and job placement. But the people they had running it were more stuck at the top, and they didn't make sure the trickle or the water flowed all the way from the top to the bottom on bringing the students through the system, the jobs and the employers and all that kind of thing. So they asked us about it, but we started seeing these numbers where we wanted to take just an example. We wanted to take the engineering students and allow them to look at these super funds, places where they had been ruled environmentally unsafe because of some previous factory or activity or something that had gone on there, and figure out how to get the land usage. What's the best thing we could do with it? Not just automatically default to a Harvard or Princeton study or Yale. Those guys got so much money, they're saying we're getting ready to give free tuition. We're going to let it go. So the elements of what we're talking about here in financial literacy and education and all these, they all come together and they funnel to it, but there does need to be kind of like a master clearinghouse or something of the beginning, the middle, and the conclusion. What's the end game? Where are we trying to go with this? Employment is probably it, but equal and parallel to employment is entrepreneurism, because you can be employed, but essentially 1099 or own the company or LLC, and this whole thing, and like the whole thing about the athletes and their money, hell yeah. That is the game. And the other thing I wanted to throw in here is that the hip hop community is kind of catching up to this. I'm hearing it. I'm not all the way up on it, but when you hear a guy like Rick Ross buying 100 acres or something down there in Georgia that he's talking about developing, and you get a guy like T.I., then you had Ice Cube coming with some proposal for the community that Trump said, okay, I'll talk to you about it. Biden said, I ain't talking to you about it. And he's getting chastised because he had an idea. We're embracing anything and everything about that, but they got money, they got an audience, they got people following them, and they're maturing and coming into the mainstream. So
as well as what Killer Mike is doing with the banking.
Yeah. The bank and all those things. But see, that's another thing that's important. In the case of where you put your money, are they supporting it back? A lot of these black banks, I ain't stepping on nobody's toes, but they have the same criteria that the SBA does in the monies that they're lending, and it ain't necessarily working for the average Joe. Maybe it's working for some or not, but again, that's credit reporting and all that kinds of stuff. So where I'd like to push this mindset is, we can pull in curriculum from all over the universe, but it's all about as well as implementing and what do you need? So Chantel, when you were saying this is what you did before, you probably have some best practices and what were the challenges, same, Kim, and bringing in these universities. We got people right now that are willing to help. I've got companies, corporations that want to do pro bono services. And essentially they're trying to do something. I don't know how long it's going to last, but I'm saying let's use them and get what we got. And then when they can see a residual value on their investment. And one last point I'll give you here. We were on a call with a group out of Detroit, and they started talking about money Hennessy spends or takes out of the Black community. Well, I'm here to say they recognize that when these Black bars and restaurants got shut down, their bottom lines got hit hard. So they're willing to give some money. They're willing to come back and say, hey, we ain't ashamed of our game, but we're gonna try and build it back up. So there's resources available.
I would like to add to the piece about the government contracts. There's a young lady here in Charlotte, Christine Edwards, with her business is called Amplify Charlotte. And she's actively working with Black entrepreneurs to help get them government contracts. So I'm not well versed in that whole spill, but she is someone that has worked in local government here in Mecklenburg and is very well versed in how to get Black businesses to be in place for procurement. She just held a webinar about a week ago, but her name is Christine Edwards with Amplify Charlotte. Very smart young lady.
To the table, but there's two sides of that, and I'm sorry I'm getting motivated here, but you're going to also go to the city and ask them to make a commitment. So part of it is, we'll come to the party, but you got to be welcoming us and doing your part too. But on the other hand, the people we're going to bring to the table already know the game. They're going to have the certifications. Their paperwork's going to be right. They're going to, and you're not going to be able to deny it. And so people like who you were just talking about, Kim, they're going to be vital and to do it, but we need to do it from on every level, the city, the county, and certainly we're going to the governor's office and talk directly. But that's when we start getting some traction. And the whole thing about the universities and all that, it all starts to fit together.
So Chuck, to that point, and David brought up a point earlier when he first started. He talked about, and I think this speaks a little bit to where you're going as well. It all builds around building capacity. And David's point was there's numerous organizations in Charlotte. Charlotte does a really, really good job of having people available to support needs of our community. But there are so many organizations that are, in some instances, hammering the same nail, where we get saturation points and it dilutes the overall message and impact. And what you're talking about is from a governmental based perspective is how do we all get on the same page when we're going to that presentment? We have the right group like the chamber that's coming in and saying, here are the things that we need to do to move things along in Charlotte to get access to funds that are necessary in these spaces. And this, to David's point, these are some of the allies that we're going and having these conversations with that we get behind message, which we also got to be able to market right to folks, to the end folks that want to take advantage of it. Because there are a lot of things that y'all discuss that a lot of the laymen don't know are available to them, right, on a consistent basis. That is a directory defining event. We can go on social platforms and find stuff about Black. We can find things about all kind of different things for clothing, entrepreneurs, blah, blah, blah. But the resources that are available to help the organizations that are trying to help, whether it be governmental programs, that's nowhere to be found. It's all the niceties of the other things that are distracting. So to that point, as we talk about when you're going in and meeting with these government organizations, how do we align together these organizations that need that type of, to be included in that dialogue that you're having with the governors and others? What can we do to pull that stuff together so we have that right, is when you're having that conversation, they're all included in the back, if that makes sense?
I want to say that let's personify this group. And let's just say you're the spokesperson or whatever. The group becomes personified, but it is supported by a coalition of these benefactors. These people are going to benefit from it, and they're speaking and they're hearing directly. The National Black Chamber of Commerce shouldn't necessarily be branded or upfront. We're just behind it, and we're helping to piece or put a link together and make sure the weakest link is as strong as possible. But we're not the usual suspects. This isn't, a chamber of commerce. Oh yeah, we know them, or the Urban League or the NAA. It's not. This is the real deal. These are the people coming forth, and so hopefully we'll come out of this with somewhat of we'll call it a script, And there will be these other elements that were considered to be the most vital or most important with it. And then there'll be people like Kim referenced, but we have them all over the country that want to provide some type of extension of capacity. You know, it may be technological, it may be monetary, it could be any number of different things. Maybe they just need some customers, you know, or maybe like you're talking about, not inventors, but people that are innovating. So like we have right now, we have, and this is the backdrop, and you can, the knife cuts both ways, but we have a company like Amazon.com that is saying essentially off the record, they want to create a Black business world for them. They want to know who the Black businesses are and they want to go get them. And they're putting all this money behind trying to say, listen, if you come on, this is what they told me, because I was kind of like saying, y'all put a lot of people out of business too. And they came back and said, yeah, but we can put 300 million pairs of eyes on your product if you come on in and let us get to it. And so then you stop being too worried about data capture and all the other stuff. And you say, can I go for it? As opposed to sitting here forced closed. I don't have any resource. I can't find any suppliers. And they're willing to put their best practices, their mentoring, if it will, into that. We have another company called Fiserv, which is First Data Company. They're doing $500 million commitment on $10,000 prizes for a pitch competition. I don't think it's been in Charlotte yet, but you pitch your idea and then they take you through what is basically an accelerator and pick the winners from it. First prize, 10,000, 7,500, 5,000, on like that. But you're getting exposure to this, you know, 15,000 employee resource type company. On the other hand, you have Instacart, which delivers groceries, Grubhub, restaurants, and DoorDash, in particular, Lyft. They're almost like all independent contractors where their whole distribution system is based on independent contracting. They don't own trucks. They don't own cars. They don't have to maintenance them. They don't have to insure them. And they got all this going and their whole company is built on that. $1 billion. DoorDash just went public the other day and their valuation went 2 or 3 times higher than they thought it was. So they're coming to us and they're saying, can you help us meet some more Black restaurants? Can you hook us up? You know, we want to see them stay in business, but at the same time, we'd like to get in that market segment and get to it. So we come back and say, yeah, was there anything you could do to help them? You know, we've been closed and dead since May or March or April, whatever, you know, and a lot of them are gone. We've lost 40 to 60% of Black business. The entrepreneurs are still alive if they can find, you know, what they're going to eat tonight. Yeah. But the articles of incorporation for that entity that they created is probably so upside down. We're going to do, you know, like bankrupts, close it or whatever, and come back with something fresh and not have to carry that burden with you. So in answer to your question, we ain't turning down nothing. We ain't turning down our collar, you know, to go out here and find what resource, what can we do with it? It's almost like somebody discards something and the other person looks at it and says, yeah, we might be able to use that and find out. So that is the spirit and the mindset. But I thrive on listening to the practitioners, to the vocational, the people on the scene on the front line and what's their situation and what's going on with them. You know, there's more funds coming out and more things that are available, but this allows for more communication, dissemination of information. And that's a big part of it.
Yeah, so when I get into my solution phase, something I'm thinking about relative to this replicates what we heard Kim, Reggie, Chantel, Will last night as we got into mental health and identifying where the businesses and opportunities are because it's so spread within this market and unknown in some other areas. You all have talked about financial literacy being important, elementary school on up, right, from that standpoint. Chantel has done a lot of work in that space, obviously, and others are quite aware. Something you said that struck me, Chuck, is you talked about scripting. And we got to get to a script space. it's almost like a program that gets set up to talk about building yourself. And it goes from elementary, we have several partners from a banking-based perspective that have supported the Made Men initiative. We have financial literacy programs that can be encouraged to participate in the school system space. So we talk about the early awareness around financial literacy. This is where you pull your allies and relationships that are there to get them behind some of that message, because there's something in it for us as well, quite frankly. The things that we owe to the community, things that we want to do. But the one thing I don't want to escape, and Kim, you talked about this earlier, I don't think it's only in the school system, right? The people graduate eventually and they need help. And when you graduate and you haven't been educated on opportunities, and it goes to David's point around the employee that came to him, is how do we touch those individuals as well to make them aware of what's available, whether it's the shelter opportunities, other programs, employment opportunities, how do you reach out, or things that are available within the community to allow them at least some piece of the pie in a scripted way that talks about building yourself from school in every stage that it goes in a scripted way. But we got to market in for lack of a better word, a sexy way that's attractive in this current environment. Because we're talking through old books in some instances where we're not taking advantage of the digital component that people go to and live on, from my perspective today, right? One, we're missing the access and the information. Two, we're missing the way that we talk to them. And if we can put some scripting together that speaks to the elementary piece and where we're attacking that piece, when you graduate out of the school system, you can't just be thrown out, to make them aware of what we may have available. But then you get into the entrepreneur space of those that have businesses, et cetera. How do you get access to funding, all in one legacy type space from soup to nuts? And we have the right people that can help build that type scripting. We need to do that to get the businesses behind that message to be a part of their curriculum. Because we all have from a financial institution curriculum, other business curriculum, and a governmental curriculum, some want and need there, but we don't have the script necessarily called out in that way. I haven't been privy to it if y'all have. But I think that's where we can kind of lend some power behind this, is to help build that type of scripting and working with the Commerce to understand, okay, what else when we pull this together to have real plan of attack, because companies are going to want to be able to see that.
You just articulated a marketing strategy. And by that, I mean, I'm thinking that, Kim, you know people that do what they do, Chantel, everybody, David, is really an honor to have you here and to hear a firsthand story about what it's like on the front line as an entrepreneur. I mean, and everybody, but what you talked about is affinity outreach. In other words, are you a healthcare, I mean, a mental health practitioner of some sort, you know, and what's your disposition and how do we fit it? Then once we can kind of like brand it or pull something together, we can take some blanket donations or funds, or even in the most part, self-funded, you know, a modernization of crowdfunding. We got some of that going on. And we found, this is an interesting thing we found, is that these community foundations, they got a lot of money, but they can only spend it within whatever that defined community is. And often it's a county. And we're just finding out that they're willing to come off some money, but they've got certain check boxes of things that you got to qualify for and whatever. So they didn't want to talk to the national level, but I said, that's okay, that's cool. And we're going to come back around and put it in place to where you are empowered. You'll have your own budget as a group. And that's what I'm saying. Think of it as a club that you don't want. Everybody ain't got to be a member of this club because of its integrity, because of its dedication, and really, you're really about trying to do what the mission at hand is, not so much be recognized for it. I mean, you'll get recognized if that's what you want, but everybody's agenda can be addressed, you know? And if you have a business and you want to make money on it, ain't no problem. Ain't no shame in the game. That's what this is about. But we're going to make it work for everybody.
Yeah, we in the healthcare, Kim and Chantel back, correct me if I'm wrong on what we heard last night, with Sister Isis Bay, who participated in our conversation around mental health. one of the places we netted out in that conversation is how do we market better? One, to make sure that people are aware those services are available to them, right? And help them understand how do they market better their acts, right? Because they need people to participate. Once those grants hit certain points, you need to figure out how to market to get people to you. And there was a miss there for them to understand, and that all speaks to capacity building, quite frankly, is to help them understand how do I get connected with other ways or market myself. And they don't think about it in that new sense. It's more traditionally sourced and thought processed out. And that's where I'm saying we got to kind of think of things in a different way. Kim, Chantel, where was I off base on that? I mean, what did y'all hear relative to that topic?
That was spot on. Spot on. I just would like to add that one of the things that came to my mind in terms of a title for that is the modern version of the Green Book. So we can wordsmith that down, but that's really where that's where I'm leaning towards.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's spot on though. It's what we're trying to accomplish, right? At the end of the day. So and David, as you think about your scenario, running into that kid who came through looking for an opportunity with you and your company, or you through the program and how you met them to mentor. If we're able to leverage scripting that pulls all these in together, I mean, would there be value, do you think, to help give somebody some guidance that's just stuck in a mud? Because and that's a different segment of life, right? That's post-school at this point.
Yes.
I mean, what's your thought?
And the post-school kids, just so you know where I'm actually start way back, right, and do financial literacy in school. But I'll give you another quick story. I had a class of 12. I did a class for a week, an hour a week, and I took a treat in to the relatives every day for my class. One day it was pizza, one day it was ice cream, one day it was, whatever, to encourage them to come. And I said, okay, how many people here have a bank account? 2 out of the 12 put up their hands, 2. So the rest of them are using check cashing places or whatever to get it done. So I said, all right, tell you what, meet me. I'm going to go back and work on something. And I would walk from my office in the Bank of America Tower to the relatives, right, 6 blocks, 8 blocks, and then walk back. And I went to the banker in the ground section. I said, look, I have a bunch of people that need accounts, and I want you to help me get them accounts. And we looked at it and what's the cheapest checking account that they could have, went through the process. Then I went to my boss and some of my peers, and I said, I want us to sponsor these kids so that we cover the charges for their accounts, and we started with a little bit of money. And they said, yes, I'll do it. And I went back and I said, all right, guys, meet me. I want us to meet at the bank at such and such a time. This is the person we're going to meet with. Oh, we can't meet. We can't come at that time because of whatever. And then I said, okay, I'm going to arrange it with the bank manager. You come and just tell them, mention me. Nobody went. So I had the accounts. I had it funded for 2 years, right? No fees. Nobody turned up. And the reason that they didn't turn up was not because they didn't want it. It was because maybe I didn't do a good enough job. As you mentioned, Cecil, my scripting was off. And they were like, man, this guy's going to bring us down there, waste my time. I'm going to get rejected in front of the bank and all these people. Hell to the no. I've had enough of this mess. And so the question is, so I'm right there with you in terms of how do we do this? But, these kids are already up against the 8 ball. They have bad credit. You know what I mean? They might even have a charge or 2 for foolishness, and they're up against it. And some of them will be unbanked. So,
yeah, I think what I would think would have been attractive to that. I also do facilitate discussions with young people at times in addition to adults. And I always say, as much as I want to be cool and say something cool, it doesn't come out right. And they end up laughing, but I'd rather for them to laugh because they remember me and because I tried. So maybe partnering with Dr. Pickney where you can come up with some cool hip hop lines. I think, I mean, sometimes it really just has to be cool, this, whatever it is. And you've got their attention. But I think you did all the right steps until that part. And that's when you lost the focus. And Baba Reggie may also have something to say about being cool and not having all the right lingo, but it will come together. It's just that one little piece that needs to be tweaked.
Well, I think excellent points. I think it just speaks to with some of our hard to reach kids, and so there are some that are harder to reach than others. It really requires us to, and while we're building them toward being more independent, it might require a little bit more hand-holding with some. We literally have to walk them through the different steps. And so even when we think we've inculcated and instilled, certain lessons and confidence, it still requires us to hold their hands and walk them through these different processes. So maybe even bringing mom in at that point, making sure they had the right clothing to put on, picking them up, so I think sometimes some children are harder to reach than others, and I think it just requires even more vigilance on our part. And so sometimes even our best efforts, fall short. So, but that's a great opportunity and a great thing you did. And just, I'd say be encouraged and keep up the efforts.
Chantel? Yeah, your hand up.
I did want to make one little comment, yeah, because that all resonates. I've seen it all with every level. And I will tell you the biggest thing is people are scared, quite frankly. When you recognize that they actually are scared to talk about money, they're scared when somebody comes in that they don't know. And I always used to use myself as an example, being a single mom, raising a kid and having a budget. Anything I did, I related it back to my personal life or family members. But the thing to keep in your head, because you did everything right. I wish we could do that at Wells Fargo. But a lot of organizations would love if we could do that. But fear. And I think about that in the back of your head as we talk about all the things we've been talking about. Nobody's gonna come out and tell you, I'm scared to talk to you, I'm scared to listen to you. But people, when you walk in, they have that barrier, whether they're children or adults, no matter what age, and until they have trust and they know that you're there for the betterment of them, that wall goes up. And I've seen it, it's breakable, and you can bring it down too. Go ahead. That's all I wanted to say.
And if I would just add the literal fear of success in some cases, if their peers do not reinforce that this is positive and, to Kim's point, this is cool, then they will almost sabotage their own opportunities, their own successes. And so you must get the peers to reinforce that this is cool and this is good.
Yeah, and I want to hear from Will in a second, because he's been in Charlotte forever, from Charlotte originally, and things along those lines. And that's where we may be going a little bit, getting a little momentum. But I'll use my mother as an example, who has grown up. She's a diplomat's daughter, came from a lot of money early on, and then you had your struggles as you grew as time went. We in the African American culture, from time to time, if you fall on hard times as it relates to things related to credit, the education piece, this is where education hits you, because we think you can never get out of it. No matter what somebody tells you, going into foreclosure, it's a seven-year process, things along those lines. And even if you haven't, my mother would have been the prime example of your case, David, where we'll never explain to you in a million years that they think there's no chance in hell anybody's going to prove my bad credit, even though the credit is just fine. But I stumbled at some point. Nobody's going to approve my bad credit at all. They will tell you, they will nod their heads and everything up until the time you're ready to walk into the bank. and then go, oh, I can't make it that date, right? And unfortunately, that is a part of our culture. I find more times than not. I've been a banker, I'm a licensed financial specialist as well, and you generally tend to get into these spaces where you're having these conversations with folks who the last thing they want to tell you is they're embarrassed, and it's the fear element that they're going to get turned down and I'm going to be exposed. So if we're thinking, and this goes back to the point that Chuck made, which really resonated with me, is if we're thinking about developing a script or some type of life guide or a green book per se, one of the things that we'd have to do is connect that with the mental health side of it as well, and sociology side of it as well, Reggie, to your point, because there's a lot built in there that gets them not to trust the fact that you've done everything you can for them and all I got to do is show up and sign my name to a paper, that there's something wrong there, right? And the embarrassment piece comes in play. We got to get over that. So it's not just the economic empowerment thing. There's some things that we need to connect mental health as well plays into that, and the programs that are there. Will, from being in Charlotte and kind of listening to some of the things that we're going, what are your thoughts around whether we may be on trajectory of making something go or building, or some other way we need to think about it?
No, I think the conversation's spot on. I mean, everyone's touched on different aspects that need to be addressed. So I think it's spot on, and we do need to acknowledge. And I forget the study, but it was done maybe a year or two ago, where Charlotte ranked 50 out of 50 cities for economic mobility, meaning if you're born poor, you stay poor. Interesting enough, I think number 49 was the Bronx, and I actually grew up in New York, but came to Charlotte when I was about 16. So I've seen kind of the firsthand. I've seen some of the things that we're all mentioning that we're trying to tackle, and that's why I continue to harp on the education piece, because I didn't have a bank account until I think I was 19 or 20 when I was in college, and it was because of the job I had at UNC Charlotte. And I mean, this wasn't that long ago. This was in 2002, 2001, and just the lack of financial awareness, even understanding credit and debt, and the way our systems are set up, where we have people that may come from backgrounds that they don't necessarily understand the impact of credit, and they get to a college campus and we've got credit card companies preying on them. We have people graduating with student loan debt and consumer debt, and you know that can just snowball and create its own issues, and you're almost starting behind the 8 ball. So I think everything everyone has mentioned is spot on.
With the department that you're in within your company, and this goes to the allyship of this, because at some point you have to convince companies to participate in something along those lines. What are some different approaches that you think about that may resonate to get, because at the end of the day, allies want to do things because they have some passion behind it, but there are also everybody does something with a return in mind.
I would say I'm fortunate enough to work with some executives at Bank of America that get it, that live in Charlotte or have lived in Charlotte in the past, that just telling them, hey, we need your support, whether it's your presence, some of the toolkits and presentations that I've seen them provide around financial literacy and wealth building, especially as it pertains to African Americans. So to get engagement there is a simple conversation.
Anybody else?
Just one point here. Certainly the financial literacy is crucial to the degree we are able to develop wealth. And again, not just through monies, but I'm big on land. I'm an agricultural man. But I think finances without the underpinnings of a level of consciousness where we understand where a lot of our feelings toward one another. And I'm certainly a big proponent of partnering with others who are outside of our community, You'd be foolish not to. However, I think it must be from a position of strength where we are able to pull our people together, and when we go and present ourselves and partner with others, it's from a position of strength. But I think the fact that we have been taught and have instructed and have been indoctrinated to not have confidence in ourselves, to not see the strengths in ourselves, we have to undo some of that. And so in addition to the financial literacy, I think it's imperative that we have minimal lessons on the African American experience or the African American experience, because Africans in the diaspora as well as on the continent, I mean, they've all been impacted, and so this distrust and it persists. And if we don't do that, we'll just be a individualized people with pocket full of money, and we're consumers just spending. And so I think a underpinning with some of those values, a love and a knowledge for self, and where we cooperate and work together and we support each other, I think that has to be the framework in which the financial literacy is, because it has to be are we just accumulating wealth, or are we developing our people?
Not to be ignored. Not to be ignored at all. But here's a question for you, Reggie, relative to that. As you think about the potential strategy around how to get people more educated around economics and opportunities to empower, right, to a position of strength. That message you just referenced, where exactly in the line, the progressive line that we're talking about, right, start to finish,
okay,
of changing mindsets, where would you install that point around community?
As I pointed out yesterday, we literally have to be in the hospital when these babies come out. When they come out of the birth canal, we got to be waiting on them right then. That's where it starts. And we have to use all platforms available. We know many of our children are in the public schools. To the degree we can influence through policy, curriculum and instruction so that this is in. But our primary way in which we introduce and we transfer these experiences that are so necessary has to be on our own time. And I'm thinking weekend, after school, out of school time. And our children, as you all know, lose so much during out of school time. Can you imagine what's happening with these kids who are studying remotely right now? How much they've lost, perhaps? So I'm big on using the various infrastructures, the buildings, the brick and mortars that exist right now, where we can, again, after school, weekends, where we are minimally teaching them, and we're ensuring that almost all of our young people have minimally had experiences and information on the Black experience. And this is not just the pathologies but the successes, the strategy, the tactics, certainly the mistakes as well. But where they're minimally getting the African American experience, history perhaps, celebrations, of course. I would also add, of course, health and again, agriculture. Again, I think it was the former president of Burkina Faso who said that, he who feeds you control you. And I'm big on entrepreneurial and agriculture, because for those young people who are not interested in college and not being, choked to death with these debt, we have to find ways in which they have practical skills. They are able to provide for the needs that exist in our community. They're able to take care of their families, make a good living, go to church, go on vacations, enjoy the communities, and do what we all do. But we're certainly not going to be able to get all of our children out there, or the masses. And I'm talking about that 30 to 40%. who have no safety nets, no support system, and their only way out is through getting some contract in sports, cutting some album, or hitting the lottery. So, and those are the populations I work with. You know, these are not the Jack and Jill. No offense to anybody. We don't cherry pick. We take the kids as they come, and so I think we should be able to use these weekends and after school to be able to really dig down, and we can talk to our children the way we need to talk to them. We can get down with them. You know, you don't have to worry about the codes and all that stuff that the schools have to abide by. You know, if you need to talk, you know, real apply some old school tactics with some of the children, we have to do that. So those are my thoughts.
Do you find many of the children that you're referencing, do they have access to social platforms?
Ask me again, Cecil.
Do they have access to social media platforms?
Social media, like the games. I mean, that's what most of them are doing.
Like Instagram, all the different grams. Well,
you know, one of the things that COVID revealed was many of our children didn't have access to Wi-Fi. So many of them, and so you see stories where children are literally going out to McDonald's and Burger King and sitting down on the sidewalk doing their homework.
And that, so my point to that, based off your program, because there's only finite hours in a day, right, relative to how to get them and get the messaging that's necessary. And to your point, outside of the school system, in some instances, to impart wisdom on some of these learnings. These kids and the destination that they take to get to places, the Wi-Fi, which in some cases is like air, right? At the end of the day. My whole point is, how do we get to that destination they're running to be able to impart that message so that and become that important based off their destination? It's like going to Walmart to shop. No matter what, people are gonna find Walmart in some instances, right? It's a destination spot, period. And if you're able to set up shop in that space, that becomes their page they have to visit. That might be a way to think about how we extend the message. And I think David mentioned it earlier, getting some influencers attached to said message to where I'm actually going to pull it up to look and listen and care. Well,
our grand plan, our grand vision for the Mel's Place, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, is to be somewhat of our model is the Tuskegee model. I mean, where we have a school or a place, a safe haven, where many of them may be wayward, but many of them are just needing to be developed, where they're able to come and learn trades and develop skills on lots of land, and they're able to be, we're able to monitor what they eat, what they consume through their eyes as well as in their stomach. And we are able to meet a need to the community, which is clean, healthy, quality, culturally appropriate food, and at the same time provide them the skills and the gifts where they're making contributions and they feel of value. They feel they're making a contribution to our community. They're able to have the respect, you know, from their children, from their wives, just like the rest of us. And so where we have trucks, and Charles mentioned where we're trading, we're exporting with other nations, and we're producing clean, healthy food that's not putting our people in the kind of position we are right now with COVID, with the pre-existing conditions, et cetera.
I just want to take a moment to applaud you. The urban gardens piece is huge. And I'd love to work with you to develop that with a commercial or a revenue model where it can be self-sustaining. And maybe even if you know, there's so many people right now that are hungry that we could teach them how to self-sustain it, but we've got similar needs, particularly if you are growing organic products or things like that. That's where the future's going. This commercial food is so messed up and contaminated and genetically modified and all that. That's what they want to talk about in Africa. That's what they're talking about in South America. You know, so hands off, keep doing it.
Thank you, brother. And part of that whole thing is on the 19th, we're going to have, so we not only grow our own food, and we've been teaching Black boys how to grow, how to market, how to sell, how to present their products since 2009. And we also partner with other Black farmers too. And we work with non-Black people too, but we really want to, because we see the strength and the values in working with other farmers. And so on the 19th, we're gonna mention with the group last night, we're gonna be having our collard greens sale. So we'll be selling collard greens. And I know most of the millennials, Chantel, are not, don't know what turnips are. So, so we're gonna have turnips, and we're gonna have sweet potatoes and cabbage and just fresh stuff, and teaching them how to prepare the foods. You know, some of the culturally appropriate ways in which we've been preparing foods, and introducing them to new ways and new diets. And so it is a journey, and to get us to brother DeBoe, to getting us to value what we produce. There's some people say, well, you want to charge for some organic green you've grown. I can go to Walmart, or I can go to Food Line, or I can go to Family Dollar and get what you're selling for $3. You're selling a bundle of collards for $5, and I can go to Food Line and get it for 79 cents or $1.50. So getting us to value it is a whole nother education in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Will.
I was going to say, and when I speak to financial literacy, that's part of it, right? Having people understand that buying from your own community is reinvesting. You need that money to continue to circulate in the community. When I speak of financial literacy, it's not just understanding, banking accounts, but it's understanding economics and how these systems work. And at some level, understanding the history of how our communities got to where they are economically. And it's because of some of the things that we've mentioned, that we haven't had the gardens, we haven't had the stores within our own communities, and we haven't supported them the way that we needed to. But I think once people start to understand how it all works and how important it is, I think it becomes, I don't even think you need to sell to someone why they should buy organic from your garden, right? It's almost instinctual, because they understand what it means beyond that.
If I could just say one more item here. We've traveled internationally as well as regionally, and for many of these young people, it's incredible for them to even leave or go beyond the barriers of Beatty's Ford Road. We've gone to Cuba and Ghana. We're going to go to Egypt in December of this coming year. When we went to Ghana back in 2018, we visited a cocoa farm. And so Ghana is the world's #2 producer in cocoa. Cote d'Ivoire to its west is the #1 producer. And the lessons that they learned about this thing is so amazing, in that this is hands-on for boys who typically don't get this kind of information. So both of those countries were producing just the raw cocoa. And you had Nestle, Hershey's, and Canterbury's, and these other European countries were all in the processing business, and this is where the money is. So through their trades and their embargoes and all this other stuff, they did not allow those countries to get into the processing business. And so we met a young lady there who had worked on this cocoa farm for years, and she had never tasted chocolate. And that was a fascinating experience for our boys who don't get those opportunities. And so being able to have those experiences in real time around business, around ethics, around, it's just an amazing, these are the ways in which our children learn. I think Charles mentioned, what did he call it? The intellectual language he used, cognitive what? So
I forgot already.
Okay.
It was cognitive something.
Okay.
And Reggie, you had a question. David posed a great question. We hit on this yesterday when we got into the quality message around some of the urban renewal that's happening in and around Charlotte, which is having implications on our communities, et cetera. And noting what you're doing relative to the Mail's Place. What can you go back to what we discussed around what happens as these families get pushed out, right? With these young men that are part of the program, et cetera.
Right. When families are destabilized, and again, when we, Baba Macaru yesterday talked about the socializing institutions that taught our children and our people who they were and what their obligations and responsibilities were destroyed to the degree as much as our family. So the family and the village was decimated. And so when these families are destabilized, and when they're in our program, and one of the great, beautiful things about our program is the confidence that the boys build and the level of stability that we are able to provide for them. They know that week in, week out, Baba Reggie and the other elders are going to be there. They're dependable. They can count on them. We'll be there. And so I think one of the greatest gifts we can give them is the consistency, is the stability. And when these families are, where most of our wealth is tied up in real estate, as you all know. And so when they lose the equity, as you talked about, Brother Chuck, when they lose the equity and lose their land and they're floundering from place to place, some of our young people in our program live in these weekly motels, and they're paying week to week, and not having the stability, not having the Wi-Fi, not knowing where they're going to eat today and all that. It makes it very difficult for them to think long term, because as mentors, we want them to be thinking, short-term goals in addition to long-term goals. But then to become fatalistic and saying, well, I won't be here to be 25 anyway. So I need to be thinking short term. How am I going to hit somebody in the head so I could eat tomorrow? And so we are, to the degree we're able to bring stability to them, consistency to them, I think we'll see better outcomes. And again, we're talking about many of our typical children and those who don't have positive people like you all in their lives. And so, again, my goal, ultimate goal would be a Tuskegee model, where there is a facility, a place or a college where children could actually live. There's hundreds of acres of wilderness and land where there is livestock, where there is production, where there is trade. There is the mechanization, there is the trucks available, there's the refrigerated equipment. There is the research being done. There's teaching being done. There's food prep being done. And we're able to reclaim a part of our history, unfortunately, where a lot of us move away from. And we're undoing a lot of the miseducation regarding food because of the role that, exploitation from USDA and slavery and sharecropping and all that. We feel we don't want to get into undignified work. They see this as undignified work. And they all think, well, if you don't have a white collar job, then you're not successful. So I just think that it's important that we really invest into programs that may not be perfect. They may be imperfect. They may not have all of the financials as the others, and may not be as lined up and may not be as polished. Tie may be a little crooked, or you may be a little scuffed up or whatever. But I think these are valuable programmings like Sister Isis and some of the others that exist. I think it's worthy of us investing in and pouring into, and not just using the same model that the white foundations and funders use. I hope
So
I answered your question. Go ahead, Cecil.
No, I think you did. So we've run to about 2 hours, and I want to be respectful of everybody's to get you kicked off for your weekend. There's probably a lot more to unpack within this space. I just want to make sure I've captured the theme of some things that we're thinking about that we want the Made Men or to consider as it relates to next steps in this particular space. And we talked about really developing a script, for lack of a better word, around how we can assist individuals from start to finish. And when I mean start to finish, we're talking about early stage programs around literacy, awareness, and as Will perfectly framed, not just understanding what banking means, but the other self-sufficient feeding mechanisms available, et cetera. And then as you grow throughout that spectrum, talking about some of the things that Chuck referenced, understanding programs that are available to you from a financial and economic perspective, and also painting a picture around where some of our shortcomings and shortfalls may be, so that we can look at different ways to how to overcome them if we're defining that for individuals, and putting a package on there, as Kim referenced, around Green Book-like references that are tied into that, just following that theme, which I think was really spot on. Mm-hmm. And Chantel got into some of the literacy components that are available to us today. David, Will, myself, Chantel, who are in the financial industry, know that we have allies that would be interested in supporting some type of mechanism that is tied into that. And the Made Men is entrenched with some of those organizational relationships already. But we also want to think about, from a National Black Caucus perspective, chamber perspective, what are some different ways that we align around the asks that are going to be locally, and how that looks into the strategy or the script that we want to hold in play, taking into consideration all of the other conversations that have been had with the other cities as well. Charlotte could be a place that supports that, with the folks that are tied in with this initiative. So I just want to make sure I captured that for Kai and their team, which will then go into some of the next steps that we'll talk about from a national chair perspective. Does that sound right as to where we were going?
Let me just add, in addition to the financial literacy, where career exploration is linked to it as well, where we're having young people look at a variety of careers and how financial literacy is the basis for it, but just really introducing them to careers that they may never even think about, like Brother Wilson last night. I mean, a lot of guys just don't think about being is it called a clothier? What do you
clothier, yeah, a clothier.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys don't think about those kinds of things, or owning Dunkin' Donuts. You know what I'm saying? I love to go and eat Dunkin' Donuts, but owning it, so
folks never ask what it takes to jump into a franchise,
right?
Or government positions that Kim's in currently, right? Those are the jobs that are really powerful, passion-related jobs.
Yes, sir.
But when Reggie, as you know from some of the things that Chantel and Kai had to speak in, when we asked them to raise their hands, it was usually, I wanted to own my own record company. We talked about this yesterday, right? I want to own my own record company. I want to be an actor. I want to dribble a ball or have a ball passed to me.
Rapper.
And I completely agree with you. And this goes back to Will's point. We keep saying financial literacy, but it's economic literacy, basically, at the end of the day, which I think more encapsulates what we're talking about here. Is we have to figure out a way to make people aware of resources available to them, educate them around why we got where we are, but then also, quite frankly, make it sexy enough that it becomes a destination spot for all ages, and speak to them in a place and way that makes sense. So we got to take the digital component into this, because it ain't just paper anymore, which could be a miss. How do we pull this together in a digital component to where they're going to platforms and social platforms that we have something available to them when they go there, because they're going there for other things. Why not to be something to better themselves in that way? And I think the Made Men can help us with that, to Charlotte's benefit, I know.
Cecil, there's one more thing I wanted to mention, and I'm not sure we really hit on it in great detail, but I think there needs to be some support for small businesses, minority-owned small businesses, whether that's some form of coaching to help with creation of business, business transformation, operations. Not sure exactly what that would look like, but just a resource. I've had conversations with minority business owners, primarily in Atlanta, just through some of my former classmates in business school, where we would just take our time to, they'd bring us a business problem, and we, donate our time and solve a business problem for them. But something similar to that, where local business owners could leverage expertise from other professionals. You're on mute.
So Chantel and I and Reggie, as part of the Made Men, we had talked about this from a Charlotte perspective. It's kind of a consortium of the Made Men ranges around professions that are tied into that. And Chantel, correct me if I'm wrong, we had a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders within the Charlotte market that were willing to lend their time to the same scenario you talked about, where people can come and have conversations, just open and informal, in some cases, dialogue around how to help them build a business case. How do I go find grant money, to the point that Kim made elsewhere? How do I build a base of customers, right? And how do I market, learning from those that have done it? How do I understand how to get into franchise? Because I want to do that. And we had a group that's interested in doing that, actually, from a Charlotte-based perspective. So your point is spot on, that this, I think, should be part of this, whatever packet we're putting together, that not only takes care of the person, right, it takes care of your entrepreneurial dreams from a small business perspective. That needs to be a part of it.
I'm feeling a community event coming on.
I'm feeling like
when I you know, I am all about that, the event stuff, and I've seen it where I've seen C.W. Williams Healthcare Center do a community event that encompassed all of what we're talking about. I really think that the challenge, well, it's not even a challenge, just doing it. Having the folks in the game that we know can contribute to all the aspects of what we're discussing, because part of my previous role was going to seminars and fairs and events in the community and with the nonprofits. And, I think everything that we've discussed packaged nicely, I can't see it not being beneficial to the organizations once they're identified and you gain that opportunity. And people will pay to play to get their messaging out. And I think with the structure, creating the structure around it, is quite a bit of undertaking. However, it can be done strategically, because there are people out there that want to showcase their business. And I know we're in COVID, so I think about this down the road, but I think there's some opportunities to also leverage the virtual space with some of the folks that we already have engaged and involved. And just like we've done this call, there's so many different nuances we can take from that to showcase and start introducing the resources in the community, and still keeping it in the framework of looking at the holistic person and not just in bits and pieces.
We also talked about a directory of sort. Brother Chuck, I'd love to connect with you.
I'm gonna put my contact in the chat, but
okay.
It's more than it's welcomed. And really, Cecil, I think you mentioned some things that all that's on the table. We're not trying to push all the resources to you, but there's a lot of resources, too much to overwhelm. But I think one of the things that I will do is almost just list everything down and all these companies and what they do and what they want to offer. And it's kind of like the incredible smorgasbord. And it isn't to knock out a local resource provider either. You know what I mean? We want to bring it out. And that's, it's like what you're talking about, the organic food and all. That is a business. That is a serious business. Mm-hmm. And the Black farmers are not, they haven't figured it out. I mean, some of them have a restaurant or something, because the products they grow are usually top of the line stuff they're having. And so there have been a brother down in Jacksonville they cooked up a thing where instead of like a food truck, it's almost like the produce section of a store truck.
Yes.
You're going through the neighborhood.
Yes.
Nice.
Fresh
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Actually, we want to buy one of those.
I would do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, we're applying for a grant to get one of those, and refrigerated trucks, produce trucks, and they're ostensibly a produce stand on wheels.
Mm.
And that way you're able to reach people who don't drive, don't have access to, and these are the people who are relying on corner stores, you know,
Yes.
for food, for groceries. And so tonight, in fact, you know what? I'm out. I got to make sure I get home at 10 by 10. So.
Wow.
So fantastic conversation.
Great job, guys. Great job.
We're going to be sending out again, this conversation has been recorded. We're going to send out listing. We're going to be working with Kai and team, just send out a list of all the speakers that have been tied in. So we have a list that's tied pulled together. We may be reaching out to those participants to re-engage as well. We will definitely be following up with this group around some of the learnings and what came up related to that. And I would probably propose we do further Zoom sessions with those that participated, our speakers as well, David, Sister Isis, and brother Thomas Bradley, and Chuck, you please as well. Just to let y'all know the findings and listings and the things we'll pull through, just to make sure everybody has a sense of where this netted out. This is a lot more to come. It's tip of the iceberg of the work, that's happening today. But me and Reggie and Chantel really appreciate your time, your flexibility, because we ran way over what we had initially promised. But I think with good purpose and substance begets great conversation. So this built towards that. So I'll go ahead and kick it over to Reggie to close us out, and really appreciate your time and wish you all a fantastic weekend. And happy holidays if we don't talk before that.
Yes.
Shay, thank you so much. We've been closing with the traditional Harambe chant. In Kiswahili, it means to pull together. And we talked about how Jomo Kenyatta, the former Kenyan leader, would open and close his meetings with a sense of unity, a sense of purpose, and collective work and responsibility. And so he would raise the right fist. So if you all would raise your right fist, okay, and we would chant Harambe 7 times. And on the 7th time, we're going to end with lots of energy. Okay, Kim, you with us?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
I put 3 energy, Kim.
I'm here.
Well,
I'm
don't
here.
wake the baby. Don't wake the baby. Well, okay. Okay, so y'all ready? Harambe!
Harambe!
Harambe! Harambe! Harambe! Harambe! Harambe!
All right, cool.
Harambe!
Fantastic.
Great job, Brother Cecil, facilitating the night, and excellent teamwork. Thank you all so much, and God bless each and every one of you.
Amen.
Excellent
Take
work.
care.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
your time.
Good night.
Good night.